technically statute of limitations are, don't start running on kids until they turn 18. That's when they become adults and they can start making claims. They could become stale. And
Okay, welcome to the show, Celia. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited because when you introduced yourself in Clubhouse and you mentioned that you take on cases of bullying, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the person that I need to speak with because there's so many questions. I know literally nothing about it. I've heard of cases going on of family members suing schools because their child was bullied despite of how many times it was reported to the school and nothing was done.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to just pick your brain. That way, people just like me who have no idea that this is even an option can learn from you. So, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So I am a personal injury attorney. I practice in Las Vegas. I've been practicing for 11 years now. And part of my practice area, I've kind of created this little niche where I represent a lot of parents against the Clark County School District. The Clark County School District is the fifth largest school district in the country. And it is extremely mismanaged. I don't think I'm saying anything that anybody here wouldn't say in terms of that part. And so for whatever reason, there's a lot of different claims that have gone on that I'm involved in, from teachers abusing kids all the way to sexual abuse and everything that you can think of in between that has happened to a kid that could get hurt at school are things that I'm looking at to see if there's a potential case and a potential for there to be something done for the family, but mostly for the child.
Okay, that's pretty clear. Yeah, that's incredible. It must be really tough because there are a lot of emotions involved and a lot of technical things, right? And
There,
also,
yeah, there's a ton of emotion, and yeah, there's the technical stuff. The technical stuff is, for me, is anyways the easier part. It's really more the emotional part, because I got to tell you, my youngest client is 6 years old,
oh wow.
and there are some things that uh, I can try to ask, but I also have to try to talk to a child about it. But really, I'm managing the parents and managing their emotions, because I'm dealing with a bunch of mama bears. That's what it is, and I don't know, what do you call the dads? Papa Grizzlies. Like, I'm dealing with just parents who are really protective of their children and are very upset, understandably so, because of whatever has happened to their child. And so they're trying to find what is that next step that I can do to advocate for my kid. And that's when they end up in my office. But there's a lot of emotions that are running high. There's a lot of things that I need to explain about how the process goes and be able to walk them through it and understand that it's going to be usually a longer process to try to do that. In the state of Nevada, there's a 2-year statute of limitations for personal injury claims. And so we try to resolve the claim within the first 2 years if we can against the school district. If we can't, we have to go to the next step, which is filing the lawsuit in order to protect the interest of the child. So what the parents are doing essentially is they're saying, I'm going to sue on behalf of my child because there's some case law out there that suggests if you don't assert the rights for your kids within the statute of limitations for your state, you might waive it. And so even though technically statute of limitations are don't start running on kids until they turn 18, that's when they become adults and they can start making claims, they could become stale and there might not be any damages, because little kids don't get medical bills, parents do.
Yeah.
And so if those parents don't assert those bills as part of the damages within the statute of limitations, the case law suggests that you may actually have no case. So there's rare circumstances where we're going to suggest waiting until you're 18 years old. For instance, I have a case right now where the child had been hit when she was 12 years old and had a bunch of dental problems. And so when you're a kid, well, your adult teeth haven't come in yet, right? So we don't know the full extent of what's going to happen until you're older. In that situation, the 18-year-old statute of limitations made more sense. And so the prior attorney did that analysis and is now actually retiring as a judge. That's how long it's been. But that case is now on my desk of, okay, now it makes sense for it to go forward, because now she's an adult. Now we can see what the permanent damage was. That's not most of my cases. Most of my cases, we need to do the analysis and the suing, if that's what needs to happen, within those first 2 years within the statute of limitations. Every state varies. 2 years seems to be about it. On the short end, it could be a year. So you really want to make sure that you know what the statute is in your particular state.
Wow, that's so interesting. You know, I never thought about having to wait because of the effects, the long-term effects of an injury like that.
Mm-hmm.
But by the way, would you please define what statutes of limitations is? Because I know that there's somebody out there that they kind of have an idea because of how you explained it.
Mm-hmm.
But let's break it down to them for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And it is something that I do try to break down those terms. I talk a lot about some of these terms on my legal TikTok. On my TikTok, it's not just a lawyer _ Cydia, but the statute of limitations is basically when your legislature, your particular state, has said this is the time period that you have in order to make a claim. And if you let that time period pass, then you no longer have the right under the law to make that claim. And so the initial thing that you do is you make a claim with like the insurance company or the risk management for the school district. You put them on notice of it. That at least gets them knowing, hey, there's a potential claim out here. But if you're not able to resolve and settle your case within your statute of limitations within that time period set by the legislature, then you have to go to court. You have to file a complaint. 1 day late, and you're out of luck. You are no longer have a claim against anybody, and it gets waived.
So then let's say that I'm like 1 day before the statutes of limitation happens, or the day of. If I file it that day, it still continues, right? Even though the 2 years have gone.
Correct.
Okay.
So then you step into the legal process. So as long as your complaint has the date of the statute or the day before, preferably way sooner than all of that, because it's very nerve-wracking to get that close to the deadline for the parents, also for myself, because there are certain things that could be eliminated because of getting that close to the date. But say you're that close to the date, as long as it's filed and you got that file stamp from the court saying, boom, it was filed exactly on time, then you're good. Then it proceeds to the next step, which is serving the complaint and then having an answer and all the other things that happen in litigation.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, this sounds like such a long process. So let me backtrack a little bit, because I'm thinking with my parent brain. Okay, my first question is, who pays for all of this? Does the parent pay for it up front? Or is this one of those things where if they get, say, some kind of awarded funds, that you get paid until that happens?
Generally speaking, these cases are done on a contingency fee. And so that's what you're talking about, where it's the attorney will take basically all of the costs. They'll put up all the costs. They'll put up all of the funds that we need to go forward. And then when there's a resolution based on whatever our retainer is, usually starts off at a third, and then it can go up from there. It's pretty standard stuff. In some different practice areas, the legislature may say, here's the percentage that you're allowed to do. They do that in like medical malpractice sometimes. I haven't heard them doing it in school district cases, but who knows? Because there's 50 states, and I could tell you, I don't know the laws of every state. But yeah, it's usually something that would happen at the back end. And, while we're talking about what would happen at the end of the case and at the end of the resolution, there's this concept of, for the kids, to protect the kids, it's called a minor's compromise. And so what ends up happening is the court says, hey, I'm going to approve this because I'm going to make sure that you're doing the settlement in the best interest of the child. And not only am I going to approve it, from there, I'm also going to make sure that all of that money for the kid is put into a blocked trust account until they turn 18. And so it could be that you end up with a nice settlement. It's going to have to go away, and the parents aren't actually going to see anything of this, because again, the parents aren't asserting the right for themselves. They're asserting it for their child. And so it makes sense that that money would then get put aside for the child when they turn 18.
Oh, this is so good. Thank you so much for explaining that. I'm pretty sure that that might give some parents relief for the moment, because every time that anybody thinks of having to hire a lawyer, they know that it's going to be expensive. And it's important that parents know this, because if your child actually needs the help and you're not getting it because you think you can't afford it, then now they know that, hey, there is another way. So,
There is. And so, but I'll also say that if there's medical bills, right? If your child should have insurance, and if your child doesn't have insurance through, your business or whatever, your child probably is covered under some sort of Medicaid that the federal government is offering, that it offers through the states. So there's really no reason for your kid not to be covered by insurance. So you may still have to pay out of pocket co-pays to going to the doctor, or things like that. But these are things that you would normally be doing anyways.
mhm.
And so the way that the law works is, of that settlement, if this is a settlement for an injury to your child, what'll happen is that money will get paid back to either the insurance company or the medical providers. And so there's portions of that that we could try to ask for. You as the parent may not get those co-pays back, because that's the benefit of having insurance. You have to pay for that kind of thing, but you'll know that, hey, this will be hopefully covered by the settlement, and there'll be money put aside for my kids. So then when they turn 18, hopefully they can do something with it. I've seen, kids want to buy a car, they save it for college. In the meantime, sometimes parents go, well, there's expenses before they turn 18. Is there something we could do then? You can always petition the court, and the court will look at the reasons that you want to take money out early, and they'll say yes or no. And I don't want to say usually they say yes. They're going to look at it. Is this in the best interest of the child? Is the child wanting to go buy a Corvette at 16? Or is it, hey, we have an opportunity to do something, and, it's not supposed to be a piggy bank to be withdrawn from. It's supposed to be here. And then when you're 18, you can get whatever all that money is. And it could be, a small amount of money, or it could be a large amount. Who knows? Depends on the case. But I'm always a little bit weary when young people come into a lot of money at 18.
Oh yeah. I think, and I'm 42, and if I came into a ton of money right now, I would probably be stressed out because it's a big responsibility.
Mhm.
But you mentioned, okay, so the resolution providing a certain amount of funds and putting the money in a trust account. But what if my child needs mental health services? Is that something that can be awarded or like and that they can use before they turn 18?
You certainly want to try to ask the court for that. I have a case right now with this exact situation in there, where my client still is going to need ongoing services. So I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to ask the court. That's what I'm going to do, and just say, hey, there are certain things that this child needs right now, and as I'm sure you're aware, Dolly, the insurance companies don't always cover mental health services.
Yeah.
And so it can be very expensive to continue with those services. So I do want to make sure that I'm advocating for my client, and that is something that is accessible. So the parents know, hey, here's a certain amount. So it might be that it gets into two accounts: one account that is not blocked, that is only to be used for mental health services by court order, and the rest of it is saved until they're 18. I haven't quite gotten there, but the nice part about the law is you can try to structure things as best as you can for that interest of your clients. And so that is definitely something that I'm going to be testing out here this year for sure.
Wow, this is so interesting. So, before a parent comes to you, are there any requirements? Should they have done certain things before seeking, help from an attorney?
um, they're not requirements per se, but I'm going to call them best practices. Okay. And this is the same thing that I would say to people if they were to get into a car accident, right? It's, if your child needs medical treatment, go get medical treatment first. Okay. That is the first thing that you want to do. Medical treatment is evidence that you were injured. So whatever that is, if that is going to the quick care, if that's going to the pediatrician, if that's going to the emergency room, if that's what needs to happen, that's really your first step that you need to make sure. And most parents are going to do that anyways, but just to make sure, um, don't have your attorney tell you go see medical providers. That one always makes me a little bit weary, but sometimes that's what needs to happen because people are just concerned about, the cost. I'm not sure what I need to do, that kind of a thing. So really, first things first, if your child needs treatment, go get medical treatment. If this is something that happened at school, make sure that you've reported it. The sooner you report it, the better. With the bullying issues that I know you talk a lot about, with those ones, you already know that documentation is super important. And so having your documentation of when you've sent things to the school, emails that you've sent, all of that stuff is going to be really important. If you're coming in for a bullying consultation, I'm going to want to see all of those documents. So if you have a portal where you communicate with the teacher on, and that's where you guys do all of your communicating, bring a printout of that. I want to see everything that you've reported, photographs, all of that stuff. If you don't have it for our first meeting, that's okay. But eventually we're going to need to see all of that information to be able to make an assessment of, is this a documented bullying case that the school didn't do anything about, and then they were physically injured or have mental health issues because of this, or heaven forbid, they committed suicide. That is how the law in the state of Nevada got passed, was a little girl committed suicide due to bullying, and then her parents were the ones that pushed for anti-bullying legislation in our state. So we have it. Unfortunately, it's due to that circumstance, but the statute is there to try to help parents and children from bullying.
So does every state that you know of, or the federal government, do they have a federal law against bullying?
No, every single state is its own little jurisdiction. And the way it works is, even though everybody has a fundamental right to education, every state sets up what that education is. And so that's why you don't actually see that we have a nationwide curriculum. For example, we may have agendas that presidents have put together with, No Child Left Behind and things like that. But what they do is they put that out there and they say, these are the metrics we want you to hit. And based on that is where we'll give you funding. So they tie it to money, not necessarily to, in my opinion, to the benefit of the child and to see if they're actually learning. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, absolutely. People ask me this question a lot. And so I do my research, and I just wanted to ask you because I'm like, maybe I've missed something, because that I know of, I haven't seen a government law that protects kids from bullying. And I know that it's a very complicated topic just to even define it, which makes things so frustrating. And I agree. I too believe they put the money first instead of what's really going on, and looking at the numbers of how many cases exist or have come up and how many have, I guess, won or lost, and all of that stuff to make better decisions. So thank you for sharing about all of this. I think you're right. It's so important. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the documentation, because I stress that so much, and parents are like, oh, but I don't have time to be collecting all this information. But you have to, because otherwise you have no grounds. So once you have parents that came and provided all of the information, approximately how long is it expected for a case to go on?
Oh, we could be friends for 6 months, or we could be friends for several years. It's really, each case is specific, and it depends on what's going on in the case to really be able to say, oh yeah, these things turn around in a year. No, they could take a really long time. It really just depends on what's going on, what the circumstances are, and what the school district's position is going to be. Sometimes the school's like, yeah, you know what, we messed up, and let's go ahead and resolve it. And then we don't necessarily agree on what the value of the case is. So it might have to go a little bit further. Other times the school district's like, we didn't do anything wrong. This was a kid on kid. We had nothing to do with this. And my position in those situations is usually, well, you're supervising. You have a duty to supervise these children. And if you're not doing that, and that leaves room for this, abuse to happen or bullying, well, that's something that we need to talk about, right? And need to make sure that we're on the same page with it. And so most of the time there's going to be some sort of resolution. Sometimes they're going to try to fight it out. It just really depends. The other thing that I would say, at least in our state, there's a cap, and that's going to be true for most places. That cap is going to, and then that's a statutory cap, and that's basically, there's a limit as or a maximum amount of money that you're allowed to recover against a government entity. And so that varies from state to state. And because the public schools are considered an arm of the government, that cap is usually going to apply. Sometimes there's ways to get around that. Depending on the circumstances of your case, you might be able to claim that there's a 1983 violation that gets you around the cap. But it really depends. And, when we were talking about the statutes, I just remembered this right now. In some states, they make it an even smaller statute when you're going against the government. And so I came across that. I think it was a case that we were consulting on in Georgia. It was either Georgia or Alabama. I remember it being down south. And they had another, even though their personal injury statute was 2 years, their government statute was 6 months.
Wow.
And you needed to do all kinds of stuff. So it's very important that you don't sit on this information for very long, and you go talk to an attorney as soon as you think you might need to. Most attorney consultations are going to be free, or at least, a nominal amount, so that way you could get that assessment. But because every state is different, even if it is a longer statute, there could be that special little government requirement, that extra little hoop that they want you to jump through, so that way you can't sue the government. So I would advise everybody to seek out counsel as soon as they think they might have something, and let the attorney advise you on that.
So, okay, so say there's a parent thinking about this. They're like, when does that statute start? Is it from the first incident or the most recent one?
Well, I'm going to give you the classic lawyer answer, which is it depends. Yeah, no, that's basically what we learned the first day in law school, and then we end up saying it for the rest of our lives. It's for a bullying case, right? The bullying case is something where you're going to notice when it starts, and then it's the way I would look at it is, when did you report it to the school? At some point, the bullying's going on, but the minute you report it to the school, that's when the school's on notice that something bad is going on. So I would argue that the statute runs from that point. Now, for example, if there's bullying going on, nothing happens. It's mostly like social or verbal bullying. Most things, you want to see what is the damage, what is actually happening. It's when it becomes physical and there's an attack, that's when you could say, okay, that is the statute, because that is a definitive point in time where you could say, my client got beat up on the school ground. Mm-hmm. They got beat up during recess or whatever it was. At that point, you can make the statute run from that point. But I'd still want to put it a little bit earlier, just to make sure that it's, if you've already put the school district on notice of this in a way that they had to document it and take recognition of it. If you just told an administrator or a teacher, like, that can work as well, but it could be that moment in time. So now that's just talking about bullying. Now, say, for example, it is a case where there's a physical injury where a teacher slaps a kid. Okay. That day that your kid got knocked around, that's the day where the statute starts to run.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, this is such good information. It's I'm glad, because a lot of what you've said, I've been telling parents, like, hey, make sure you document, make sure, follow the procedures, make it official, because so many parents are like, oh no, it's not a big deal. I just told the teacher that should be good enough. I'm like, no, it really shouldn't. Especially, you've mentioned, seeking medical attention. That's super important, because that is part of documentation. And I love that you just mentioned that the physical pretty much always takes priority over all other types of bullying. And it is something that really frustrates me, because I know, and I have seen where verbal abuse, verbal bullying, and mental bullying is sometimes worse than physical, but
Mhm.
it's a lot harder to prove.
It is a lot harder to prove, but in those situations, going to the pediatrician, getting an evaluation with a therapist of, hey, this is causing my child depression. It's causing them to need to get on, anxiety medication, whatever it is. If you can document that and you can have a medical provider say, yeah, these are effects of bullying. Now you've got medical evidence, not just your word. You've got something more to be able to say, hey, this is going on and this is unacceptable. And now not only do you have that documentation, you have the keyword damages, because now you've had to take them, you've paid $200 or whatever, to go see. It can get kind of expensive to see a therapist sometimes. I think that I've seen that as low as $50-$60 on up to a couple $100. So it really just depends on where you're at. But that is now a damage. Anything that you have to spend, medical bills, therapists, equipment. So say your kid needs a wheelchair, you need to start doing private tutoring, like any of that stuff. If you're spending money that you shouldn't be spending because of whatever happened, whether it was physical abuse, even like sexual abuse, any of those things, at that point, you now have damages. And that's really what you need to make any case in negligence. Most of this is in the realm of negligence. Very few times are we going to see where any of this was done intentionally. Those are very rare. But most of the time it is negligence, and negligence requires that you have some sort of damage. So just saying he's not doing good, she's not doing well, is not going to be enough. You need to have some sort of damage that you can show to the court. Look at what it's costing us, because that's just the way negligence works.
So let me say that again. So do all oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Okay.
This is what we do with all the behind the scenes stuff. We just cut all of this and we post it on. It's fun.
So do all personal injury lawyers take on bullying cases?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some people are a little bit more hesitant to be involved with children. It takes a certain, I want to say, personality to be able to deal with that, because it's also hard, right? Because a lot of attorneys have their own kids and they're going to see those struggles, and it's very hard to have a child client and see them suffering. Yeah. And so I can't say every personal injury attorney is going to do it. If they're not willing to take on the case, they may say, I don't take on cases against the school district. And it might be a couple of reasons. It might be because they don't want to have a child client, because it can be a little bit harder and it can be a little bit sadder. But it also could be because there's a cap and financially it doesn't make sense for them to do it. And so even though we have a cap here of $150,000 against the school district, we still take on the cases at my law firm. Sometimes there might be a case where we don't think there's going to be much more to be able to get out into litigation. And so then at that point, you have to make a decision along with the parents of, is the cost of pursuing this going to make sense? Are we going to spend $10,000 for you to only get $1,000? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so then you have to make those kinds of decisions as well. So the fact that the attorney may not take on your case may not be because you don't have a case, and they'll tell you that, no, you have a case, but I can't take it on. And they may even be that blunt and let you know, look, the cap here just does not make it worth it. But the nice part about the law is that there are definitely lots of things that parents could do on their own if they wanted to. But just like you wouldn't do your own dental work, I would still advise that you would get your own attorney to help you out with this process.
And when you mean the cap of 150,000, that is the compensation for the attorney for having done the work, but that doesn't.
Oh no, that's for the whole case.
Oh, for the entire case?
That's for the entire case, yeah.
So you mean like the parents too? That's how much?
That's total. So for example, if it's a case where the child was injured at school because there's a pothole in the middle of the playground that hasn't been filled, okay, that's I would love that example. I've never seen anything like that, but say that there is, right? Your kid trips and falls at school because it wasn't maintained properly, and they end up with a broken bone, and you have about $30,000 in medical bills. The most that the law says in that situation that you could get would be $150,000. So if we were to go to trial and show, now their legs are uneven, they're not going to be, their growth is going to be stunted, it doesn't matter. The jury could come back and say, you get $1 million. The cap, the judge is then going to reduce that down to the cap. So we would never take that case all the way to trial because we already know the maximum ceiling that we could recover is going to be that. So then you take $150,000, best case scenario is you get the full $150,000. From there, you take off the medical bills. Now you're down to actually, first you take off the attorney's fees, because that's the way the laws work in most of the places, the attorney's fees and costs. So say, that's a third of that. Now you're down to, from 150, you're down to 100, right? Then there's the medical bills. Then you're down to, at that point, 70. And then 70 would be left for the child to put into the bank account. That's best case scenario. That number would be really high for those kinds of medical bills. I would expect it to be a lower amount. But yeah, so that's the maximum amount. So if it's going to cost, I've seen experts on like autism, right? I have a lot of clients who are on the spectrum, and sometimes I need an expert. They can cost $5,000 to $10,000. And all of that comes off the top. So the more you spend, the less there's going to be there for your child. And they're the person who was injured, right? So it really depends on the case. There's so many different factors and different ways that these things could play out. But yeah, if that cap is in a place where it's $50,000 and your kid's medical bills are $30,000, there's not a whole lot to go around, right? And so in that situation, an attorney may say, you know what, I'll take it this far, but not any further, because at that point you're just throwing good money after bad, because there's not going to be enough of a recovery for everybody.
Wow. That's insane, because I understand why there are caps, but it's kind of unfair for the parent who has to pay long-term or lifelong medical expenses, and all they could get is 50, which, like you said, it's rare.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. And I know that one of the things that you talk about and encourage people to do is to talk to their legislatures. Statutory caps are something that you can talk to your legislatures about, because we see caps in various different areas, including medical malpractice, and we are not confident that these are necessarily constitutional. And so in some places they've gotten rid of them. They've said, no, these caps are not constitutional. We don't agree with them. There should not be a limit, even if it is the government. In other places, the government has been able to make the caps very small, make the deadlines very fast, so that way somebody who doesn't know will miss them. And I understand it, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're getting money from the government, you're getting money from the other taxpayers. And so they don't want there to be a giant windfall, or for everybody to be able to get these large amounts of money. They're trying to protect the government from going bankrupt. I understand some of the reasoning behind it, but like you said, it's not always fair, especially when you have long-term care and excuse me. It's not fair when you're seeing that there's long-term care and that there's just costs that the parents have to deal with that may exceed whatever those caps are.
Wow. Yeah. Ooh, you've taught me so much. I'm so glad that we linked up. There's so much more I want to ask, but yeah. So if there's a parent watching and they want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
Well, I practice in the state of Nevada, and I'm at Bighorn Law. They can certainly reach out there, and they can also find me on all the socials. Mostly Instagram's probably one of my favorites to be on. We hooked up on Clubhouse. That's a good spot too, but they refer everybody to Instagram. So on Instagram, I'm Cidia.Gutierrez.Esquire, ESQ. And Yeah, those are the best ways to hook up. Bighornlaw.com, or our number is 702-333-1111. We also have offices in Arizona and Utah, and they're taking on litigation, or they're taking on school district cases in those areas as well.
And you mentioned earlier you have a legal TikTok, right? Where you
I do. Yeah. My legal TikTok, I spend a lot of time there. I've explained a lot of these terms. I've probably explained about 30 or so legal terms, or different things that you could do within the law. I'm shifting it a little bit more to mental health, but there's a lot of good content on there. So if you want to check any of that stuff out, it's Not Just a Lawyer _ And on top of being not just a lawyer and a content creator, I'm also a podcaster. So I've got my podcast, Pivotal Moments. We talk about the effects of mindset and, well, actually, let me do that again. The podcast is Pivotal Moments. It's a podcast sharing, exploring, and celebrating stories of change through mindset and wellness and their impact on relationships, both to ourselves and others.
Yeah. And I love your podcast. I've been enjoying the conversations on there. I think it's very valuable and I love what you're doing. Thank you so, so much for making time to come and share all of this good, super valuable information with my viewers. And hopefully you'll come back and teach us some more about anything going on, any updates that parents should know of or anything of that sort, or more health talk.
Absolutely. I'd love to. I loved our conversation this morning.
Thank you. Well, there you have it. Oh my gosh. Syria I feel like I went back to school on this very important topic that I should have gotten in the school of parenting, at least. So there you have it. I mean, you can reach out to her. You can go to the Bar Association to look for an attorney who might be able to help you. So don't forget about that. And please share this video with somebody who might need it. Share with other parents, with grandparents, with caregivers, with foster parents, with a legal guardian, because the more tools that we have, the more confident we feel in being that advocate for a child. So if you like this video, click like if you're watching on YouTube, and click that little bell so that you're alerted every time I post a new video. And please come on to dalitalks.com and subscribe to my newsletter. By subscribing to the newsletter, you are notified about upcoming events, upcoming guests, and other resources. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, I'll see you next week.